Chapter 35, Bellator in Machina. October 12th, 2086. High orbit above Terra Nova, Alpha Centauri star system. Suspended in the brilliant light of the binary stars, a bluish-green planet drifted gently along in its orbit. This was the first planet to be colonized by humans after the Second Hyperspace War. Terra Nova, as it was called, played host to Lovell City, the only metropolis on its surface. In orbit, Yutaka Yamamoto University took the shape of a gargantuan space station, roughly the size of a small moon. The school, also known as Yutaka U, was humanity's first attempt at building a megastructure. Ambitious engineers referred to the design as a science nexus, and claimed that one day it would vastly outclass all other research and development facilities in the galaxy. But today was not going to be that day. Not too far from here was a tiny point of light known as Proxima Centauri. This red dwarf is the closest star to Earth besides its own sun. Hidden by the clouds of dust blown off this dying star, the Navy of the United Nations was massing for its next move. Just under 900 starships were orbiting Proxima Centauri, including motherships, battlecruisers, carriers, destroyers, frigates, and many squadrons of strike craft. This force was near the entirety of the UN space fleet, with only the Prophet-class cruisers and their escorts being absent. This morning, a small flotilla of corvettes appeared out of a hyperspace gate and moved to join the Armada. One of them docked with the battleship Charlemagne, fresh out of her refit at Port Armstrong. As soon as the corvette entered the battleship's hangar, a lonely asteroid, thousands of miles away, turned and began to put some distance between itself and the fleet. In truth, this was no hunk of space rock. Using her external hologram emitters to keep up the disguise, the spaceplane Niagara slowly crept away from the scene. In the cockpit, Varian and Maui handled the controls very carefully. Stealth was of the utmost importance. Once the spaceplane was underway, Maui unstrapped himself and moved into the crew area, where Corder and Kingi were hard at work. "Are you sure this intel is good?" Kingi asked for the umpteenth time. "We have to be sure." "Keep asking, the answer won't change," Corder said. "Varian's grandpop is confident, and his intel's never been wrong before. Scarlett Freeman just boarded the Charlemagne." "According to Mr. Robinson, Freeman will only be aboard the Charlemagne for a few hours," Nainu chimed in. He was sitting on the ceiling. The Niagara was too small for artificial gravity, and the 6 crew members were drifting about freely. Setla, in particular, was enjoying the effect of weightlessness, and was using his spare time to recalibrate the Niagara's newest weapon, installed during their recent visit to the Angel Moon. "I remember the briefing," Setla said. "Freeman is there for a political meeting with Admiral Siajotso, something to do with Secretary General Etienne's re-election." "Etienne, Freeman, and Siajotso are political allies," Nainu said. "We've got a chance to remove 2 of them from play at the same time. Blake Robinson will take care of Etienne after this, I hope. Varian, how long until the GDF fleet gets here?" "If McCavity and the rest jumped at the correct time, then they'll be here in about 20 minutes, Varian replied from the cockpit. "Remember the plan. We're not out here to destroy the whole damn Navy, we just want them to scatter and run away. The second Charlemagne tries to turn tail and run, we put one through the hyperspace module, and then we kill everyone on that ship," Corder finished. "Then I spacewalk over there and visually confirm Freeman's corpse." "Sounds like a great plan," Varian replied. "Let's roll." The Galactic Defense Force arrived right on cue. All 6 Stormbreakers cheered as hundreds of green, purple, and yellow waveforms appeared in the open space just beyond Utaka University. Nearly every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy was represented. There were Partogans, Tidani, Mykor, Kelt, Ashurians, Morbazak, Blorg, Skildari, Vagar, Levakians, Vor, Kelazon, Praku, and even a single Higaran mothership with an escort fleet of battlecruisers. They could even spot the Mahuika, a massive Partogan warship that served as the GDF flagship. Jericho would be aboard this historic vessel, along with the other GDF leaders. "Action stations!" Varian called from the cockpit. "Everyone strap yourselves in. Quarter, track the Charlemagne and don't fucking lose her!" The human armada was caught by surprise and slow to respond. By the time the first picket ships rose to defend the armada, the first squadron of GDF frigates were moving into firing position. Maui returned to the cockpit and took the other half of the controls. He and Varian waited just a moment for everyone else to strap in. Then it was time to fight. "Shut down the emitters," Varian ordered. "Polarize the armor and shunt power to the engines." "Energy cannons spooling up," Maui confirmed. "It's time to rock." Varian wrenched the control column and put the Niagara into a hard turn. At the same moment, the hologram emitters shut off. The Niagara dropped her disguise and turned into the sunlight. Caught in all the light of the 3 stars in the system, the spaceplane flashed like a brilliant flare, briefly brighter than nearby Sol. "That's done it! They see us!" Quarter reported. "We've got 4 Raven-class interceptors coming our way. The rest of the fleet is moving to engage the GDF. "We need the Charlemagne to ignore us," Varian said. "Focus on those Ravens, but keep us as far away from Freeman until she starts trying to escape." "Guns up! Here they come!" Kingi shouted. The 4 interceptors reached the spaceplane and opened fire. Maui laid in an evasive maneuver, and the first wave of mass driver slugs struck a glancing blow on Niagara's armor plating. Varian felt the joystick shudder in his or her hands. Quarter, Nainu, and Kingi each took control of an energy cannon turret and opened fire. Red plasma spheres shot away from the spaceplane, chasing the enemy fighters away. "Keep an eye on the sensor manager, Setla," Varian called back. "Call out the UN and GDF fleets." The Niagara started to dance with the 4 Ravens, spitting plasma while dodging hot metal in return. Varian and Maui were thrown from left to right as the spaceplane evaded incoming fire. In the cockpit, both joysticks began to vibrate, signaling an enemy missile lock. Gripping the control column with one hand, Varian hit the countermeasures button before putting the vessel into a spin. White flare shot away from the Niagara just a moment before the radar warning receiver lit up. "Incoming missiles," Maui reported. "They're going after the decoys." "Flip nose down and bring the dorsal turrets to bear," Varian ordered. "Kingi, Nainu, get ready back there." The Niagara pitched over and started to dive, aiming for Proxima Centauri. Nainu and Kingi watched their targeting computers intensely, then poured a volley of fire into the first target they saw. A cloud of gas and debris erupted from the incoming fighter before it flew past the Niagara. Disabled, the Raven kept flying in a straight line. The pilot was most likely dead, but there was no time to check. "The UN and GDF fleets have met," Setla reported. "I see a formation of 9 super capitals, flanked by frigates and corvettes on the UN side. GDF has deployed strike craft, lots of bombers and corvettes." "Where's the Charlemagne?" Maui asked. "Center of a strike group," Setla responded. "Surrounded by destroyers and fighters. Flying around the GDF's left flank and taking shots at a Partogan carrier." "Eyes up, those fighters are coming back," Quarter said. "They'll be on our tail in a minute." "Anyone have any bright ideas?" Nainu asked. "I've got one," Varian answered. "Has anyone ever heard the tragedy of Icarus?" "Varian Robinson, don't you fucking dare!" Quarter screamed, but it was too late. Varian swung the control column around and pointed the Niagara toward the gap in between Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. the two main stars in the system. Ignoring Quarter's protests, Varian throttled the engines and powered toward the binary stars. Mass drivers spitting, the remaining interceptors gave chase. Down and to the right, the two opposing fleets traded weapons fire. Setla kept one eye on the sensors manager, watching the Charlemagne. "Freeman's vessel just opened fire on a Higaran mothership," Setla reported. "Wait a minute. Oh, holy mother of Jericho! It's the Ashoka!" "You know them?" Kingi asked. "The Ashoka is a pirate ship," Setla replied. "I used to see them in the trade routes near my homeworld. How did the GDF get Halimi Haka on their side?" "Worry about it some other time," Varian said. "Setla, scan for solar flares. Nainu, are those bandits behind us flying in formation?" "Wait, what?" Nainu and Setla said together. "Solar storms! Bandits in formation, yes or no?" Varian yelled back. Setla quickly reset the sensors manager and scanned the binary stars, while Nainu confirmed that all three of the interceptors were flying in a standard delta formation, shaped like an arrowhead. "I have a solar flare on my scope," Setla reported. "Alpha Centauri A. The coronal mass ejection is heading into deep space. Heading is 27 degrees to port, 9 degrees down." Varian tweaked the controls and dove, aiming for a super colossal ejection on the surface of the star. "The enemy is veering off," Kingi reported. "They're giving up the chase. Probably can't see us because of that solar storm we're flying toward." "Activate the hologram emitters," Varian ordered. "Make us a UN interceptor and fall into their formation." Shrouded by the brilliant light, the Niagara vanished completely, and a moment later, a Raven-class interceptor flew in the opposite direction. The trio of enemy fighters were still circling the spot where Niagara disappeared, searching for her. As the disguised spaceplane drew near, Varian ordered each gunner to pick a different target. A moment later, one of the enemy fighters tried to contact Niagara. "Unidentified strike craft, your tail number looks obscured. Turn off your hologram emitters, transmit today's recognition codes, and give us the name of your carrier." Instead of a reply, 3 red spheres appeared out of nothingness and collided with each fighter simultaneously. The enemy interceptors spun off into the darkness, accompanied by swirling clouds of debris. "All targets disabled," Kingi reported. "Now we can get back to Freeman. Where is she?" Setla went back to the sensors manager. "The two fleets have pulled apart," he said. "I can see about a dozen super capital ships in the empty space between them. All disabled. Charlemagne is near the center of the UN formation. She's firing on the GDF fleet. I think both sides are engaged in an artillery duel." Maui and Varian had the same idea. They swung the spaceplane around and began to place the Niagara directly in between the UN fleet and the Sol system. "Now we just need the GDF to do their jobs," Quarter said. "Holy Jericho, have you guys stopped to look at the human fleet? How many ships they've got?" "I think McCavity was right," Maui said. "That's the entire human navy out there. All human firepower in one place." "What about the GDF? Do they have reinforcements coming?" Kingi asked. "Not that I know of," Varian replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because I have hyperspace signatures on my scope," Kingi declared. Nearly 2 million miles away, in the gap between Proxima Centauri and the rest of the system, a third armada was emerging from hyperspace. From here, the sensors manager could just barely make out the new arrivals. A fleet of nearly 10,000 alien warships appeared, with weapons and configurations unlike anything ever seen before. Niagara's onboard computer failed to identify the new ships and simply flagged them as unknown contacts. Amidst the sea of unfamiliar dots on the screen, one signature stood out. Varian looked down at his or her targeting computer and swore. "No way!" Varian yelled. "Bullshit!" Quarter exclaimed. "It can't be them!" Kingi swore. It was. Surging out from the formation of weirdly symmetrical starships was a lone human vessel. Looking quite different but still recognizable, the JSDF Archangel screamed down towards the battle. The radio waves crackled, and Varian jumped for joy at the sound of their own mother's voice. Attention, Galactic Defense Force. This is the XCOM warship Archangel. We have brought reinforcements and are prepared to assist. Maui pushed his talk button. "If there's a Robinson aboard that old hunk of junk," he called out, "then help us out over here. Pin down the battleship Charlemagne. Don't let them escape." Maui's words were well chosen. As soon as the flotilla of alien ships turned toward the human fleet, it began to scatter. In what was perhaps the wisest decision of the day, UN Admiral Siajotso had decided to retreat. But the alien vessels were here for a fight, and they gave chase. Varian and Maui tried to turn the Niagara and join the pursuit, but they were both distracted by a sudden whining noise. A shrill cacophony was so overwhelming that both pilots had to tear off their headsets and let them drift around in the cabin. "What the hell is that noise?" Varian yelled. "Sensors say it's coming from those alien ships," Setla replied. The aliens were announcing their presence to everyone in the system. A highly digitized voice emitted through the speakers, so garbled that it was very difficult to make it out clearly, as it declared, "Contingency protocols activated. Commencing targeted sterilization of local space. Attention war forms of the United Nations of Earth. Your self-termination in an orderly, efficient, systematic manner will expedite sterilization." And then the alien ships opened fire. Brilliant golden beams shot across the empty vastness of space, traveling much further than the maximum range of ion cannons. A human mothership was raked by the beams and cut in half, spilling the contents of her hull into the void. Diving through the rapidly growing sea of wreckage, Archangel and Niagara found one another and powered into the center of the human fleet with Ashoka and the GDF Armada close behind. With all three fleets locked in close quarters battle, the time for talk and planning was over. Each moment was a life or death struggle that felt like an eternity. All 6 Stormbreakers worked feverishly to keep pace with everything happening around. Amidst the chaos, the Niagara and Archangel flew in a tight, broad formation, so close together that Varian could see Chris Wright and Randall Murphy in the cockpit of the other spaceplane. Both warships turned together and dove into the center of the fray. The empty space between the battling starships was filled with smoke and debris. Swarms of human, GDF, and contingency fighters whirled around one another, spitting fire into the void. Frigates formed up into grid formations and poured withering punishment onto capital ships, while battlecruisers and destroyers turned broadside and brought all of their guns to bear. "Niagara calling Archangel," Varian said into his or her radio headset. "We've got a high-priority target. Scarlett Freeman is aboard that battleship, 30 degrees to my lower starboard. We've got to kill her now." The digitized voice of Himawari Robinson replied quickly. "Acquiring target. Charlemagne-class battleship, FS Charlemagne. Locked on." Things were happening too fast for Varian to process the idea of sharing a battlefield with their own mother. Ahead of them, a web of bright blue ion beams suddenly appeared, crisscrossing in space to make a web of light for just a second before fading away. A human carrier exploded into flames, filling the path ahead with a chaotic conflagration. Pushing down on the control column, Varian and Maui flew the Niagara around the periphery of the blast, coming into sight of their objective. "Mom!" Varian called out. "Scarlett Freeman's ship is dead ahead!" "Contact front!" Setla announced. "A strike wing of Ravens just launched from Charlemagne." "Lock onto them with energy cannons!" Maui ordered. "We've got to save our new weapon for later." "Niagara, take point," Himawari ordered. "Friendly ships forming up behind us." A squadron of contingency strike craft, each one too small to hold an organic pilot, fell into line behind the spaceplanes. Focus on Freeman, Quarter called out. Let the Ravens pass between us and fight our allies. The Archangel broke to the left, while Niagara broke right. Like missiles, all of the interceptors shot past the two spaceplanes and engaged the swarm of contingency fighters. One by one, each Raven was picked off with ruthless efficiency, and all the while the two spaceplanes continued bearing down on Charlemagne. We're coming into weapons range, Nainu called out. Everyone hang on! Target their engines and hyperspace module, Varian responded. Let her rip! Charlemagne, Archangel, and Niagara all opened fire. Nuclear missiles sped away from the battleship, while energy cannons spat plasma into the darkness. Incoming nukes! Randall yelled from the Angel. Blast curtains down! In the cockpits of both spaceplanes, the pilots drew heavy black curtains across the windscreen a moment before a magnificent white light filled the darkness of space. Detonation! Setla said. The enemy is setting up a thermonuclear wall. Veer off before we fly into it. Negative, blow through it, Varian said. I'd rather get cancer than let Freeman get away. Both spaceplanes sailed through a dense cloud of nuclear fireballs, pushing their engines to the very limit before emerging on the other side. The Charlemagne was now just 5 kilometers away, close enough for much more lethal weapons. Watch out! Randall warned both his ship and the Niagara. Pulsars and ion cannons coming to bear! Beam weapons stabbed into the inky dark, missing the spaceplanes by narrow margins. Maui, Varian, Randall, and Chris all had to fly desperately with intense and violent maneuvers to avoid being hit. Nainu tried to avoid looking out the windows where he could see just how narrowly they were all avoiding death. Meanwhile, the Charlemagne had a new problem. A Cybon dreadnought drew level with the battleship and commenced a vicious broadside salvo. Charlemagne turned her guns to face the new threat, creating an opening for the spaceplanes to approach. They were now within just 2 kilometers of the battleship. Scan for life signs, Varian ordered. I won't be able to tell you which one is Freeman, Setla responded. Do it anyway, Varian retorted. We've got to be certain she's dead when this is all over. Quarter, Nainu, Kingi, target their hyperspace module and we'll swing around to the engines. Archangel, keep those guns off us! You heard Niagara, Randall told his crew. Gentlemen, let's plow the road! The Archangel swept low, flying mere feet above the Charlemagne and blasting away with energy cannons. Of course, the 50-year-old warbird was punching far above her own weight class, and to the surprise of no one, the Archangel's energy cannons had no effect on Charlemagne. That armor is too strong for energy cannons, Himawari reported. The Archangel will lose power before we cause significant damage. Just keep them busy, Varian ordered. Quarter, that damn hyperspace module! I have it on the targeting computer, Quarter replied. I'm bringing the big gun online now. We've only got 10 shots with that thing, Maui said. Aim carefully, Quarter. Buffeted around by weapons fire, the Niagara screamed toward the Charlemagne's exposed hyperspace module. At long last, it was time to deploy the Niagara's newest weapon, designed using schematics Maui stole from the UN base in Alpena. This experimental platform carried a high amount of risk and was limited by a small supply of ammunition, but the potential to inflict major damage on ships like the Charlemagne was too valuable to pass up. A small sliding door under the Niagara's nose slid back to reveal the barrel of her dangerous new weapon, a spinal-mounted railgun. Unlike the turret-mounted energy cannons, this thing could only face forward. If the Niagara was not perfectly aligned with her target, the shot would miss. Varian, come 2 degrees to the right and nose up just a little bit, Quarter said. Varian tweaked the controls as best as he or she could while keeping the ship on an aggressive path towards the enemy. Maui punched the countermeasures button, sending flares and chaff into space to throw off incoming missiles. Hold her steady, Quarter called out. We are lined up. I have hammerlock. Get ready for a big jolt! But there was no big jolt. At that moment, the Stormbreakers heard a panicked voice cry out over the radio. We're hit! We're hit! It was the Archangel. The old space plane veered off and broke contact, smoke and flames belching from her left wing. As soon as the Archangel turned to run, Charlemagne turned her own guns. Anything not firing on the Cybon warship was now focused on Niagara. Railgun, hold fire! Varian yelled. Evasive maneuvers! Maui added. Evade! Evade! Charlemagne opened fire, sending a lethal volley toward Niagara, who just barely got out of the way in time. Hang tight, we're coming around! Varian yelled. She, or he, was being pushed back into their seat by centrifugal force as the spaceplane executed a hard turn. In that desperate moment, Varian got one last look at the surrounding battle. The UN Navy was being systematically destroyed. Contingency warships flew in large, spherical formations, trapping their enemies inside a hellish ball where death came from all directions. Wreckage and derelicts were scattered in all directions, and the human fleet was even further afield, all searching for escape routes. And that included Charlemagne itself. Power spike on the Charlemagne, Settler reported. They're gonna jump! Varian and Maui had a split-second decision to make. Out of the corner of the blackout curtain, they could see the Archangel. Himawari's spaceplane was crippled beyond the ability to fight and was limping away at half speed. Human starfighters were swarming the Cybon dreadnought. The Niagara was alone. Power down the energy cannons, Varian ordered, and bring the hologram emitters online. We're gonna follow Charlemagne. No one objected. Stand by for wake jump, Maui said, flipping several switches with one hand. Power down the sensors and anything non-essential. We need Freeman to think she dragged some wreckage along for the ride. The Stormbreakers quickly moved about the fuselage, shutting off all of the radiating sensors and killing the lights. It was time to play dead. I've locked onto Charlemagne's hyperspace signature, Maui reported. They're gonna pull us behind him and won't be any the wiser for it. This is it, Varian said. We spring this ambush and kill everyone on that battleship. Freeman's not getting out of this alive, Kingi roared. About 50 meters in front of the Charlemagne, a quantum waveform opened up, resembling a wall of purple light. Then it swept backward and enveloped the battleship, extending just far enough to take Niagara with it. Together, the two enemy starships plunged into hyperspace.